The member for Hunter.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I have enormous respect for the member for Grey, and I can't work out quite whether he really believes what he's telling the House, or he's just picking up on the government's spin on this subject. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and come to the conclusion that he really believes the things he just said. And I only recommend to him to have a closer look at this subject and to give it more thought, because I really do believe what he has just said about the impact of these reforms on the university sector is just wrong. And in particular, his failure to grasp, in particular, the impact on regional universities, including the campuses he was just referring to. Indeed, on few occasions have I watched a debate in this place so closely, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I have watched with somewhat bewilderment as rural and regional member on the other side have got to their feet in defence of what I think is an indefensible policy. The member for Riverina was amongst them not that long ago. I thought you did. I apologise to the member for Riverina. Well, the member for Riverina has indicated that he certainly will be speaking on this bill, and I assume in doing so he's indicating that he'll be speaking with enthusiastic support of the bill, although he is now indicating, Mr Deputy Speaker, that we should wait and see. So I look forward to the member for Riverina getting to his feet in this place and giving a genuine and honest critique of the bill which is before this place. Isn't it amazing how the members for Eden Monaro, and I'm not sure about the member for Page, whether he's got to his feet on this issue yet, but certainly the members for Braddon and Lyons and Bass and others have got to their feet and consistently made very similar contributions in defence of what I think is the indefensible. I look forward to the member for Indi making a contribution, because she'll no doubt, as a regional member, person who represents both rural and regional areas, make a different contribution. I very strongly suspect, because people will appreciate in this place that she does understand the impact of these changes on regional Australia, and I think people watching on who will be following both people in the coalition and the Labor Party making contributions can look to her contribution as a truly independent and objective one, and I recommend people take note of what she has to say. I first make a disclosure, Mr Deputy Speaker. All of my children have had the benefit of attending regional universities, and I want their children to have the same opportunity and a chance to attend a high-quality and affordable university in the region, which they've been able to do. Now, there's been a lot of debate and discussion about the minister's higher education reforms, but within all that there is one fact, whether those opposite like it or not, and that is that fees will go up, and Christopher Pyne has acknowledged that himself by saying that he thinks it's fairer that students make a 50% contribution to their higher education learning rather than a 40% contribution. Well, by any definition, Mr Deputy Speaker, that's a fee increase for students. It can mean nothing else. So fees will go up, and students will be carrying greater debt for a longer period of time. These things are just a given. And again, the minister himself hasn't contested that point by explaining his main objective, and that is to make students make a greater contribution. Now, while I disagree with both the Prime Minister and his minister, I understand there will be some people out in our electorates that won't. There will be some who do believe, particularly those who haven't themselves had an opportunity to secure a university degree, who believe the taxpayer should pay less. I respect that and I understand that, but to them I make 4 points. First, education demand is of course price sensitive. That is, many students either can't afford to pay more or won't see the value in paying more. For example, the Australian Veterinarian Association modelling suggests that a young person contemplating life as a vet will face a final debt fee of around $250,000. Now, given the average annual wage for a vet in Australia is some $76,984, you can see that a young person, and I'm thinking particularly about a young person living in rural and regional Australia, might not see that as a good financial investment and might therefore make another choice. Second point, we need rural and regional Australia to be doing well to come to the conclusion that Australia is also doing well. Therefore, we want regional universities to thrive. This is where the minister's sort of free market approach really starts to run into trouble, Mr Deputy Speaker. Now, make no mistake, the government's plan for our universities will hit regional universities hardest. Therefore, it will hurt the aspirations of rural and regional communities and all those around them most. The minister expects universities to replace the billions of dollars he's cutting from their budgets by increasing student fees. But unlike the sandstone universities in our capital cities, the capacity to put fees up is limited by the capacity of the students to pay. This is a basic fact. A basic fact. Let me expand. The Australian National University, the alma mater of the Shadow Minister sitting next to me, has 7,832 undergraduate students, of which 273, or 3.5%, are in the lowest socio-economic status band. In other words, to use the Australian vernacular, they're the poorer students. Just 3.5% of them. For the universities of Sydney and Melbourne, the figures are 7.3 and 8.4% respectively. By contrast, Central Queensland University is at 35.5%. 35.5% of their students are from the low SES band. Southern Cross University, 26.4%, the University of New England, of course, in the hometown, the electorate of the Minister for Agriculture. I bet convention of this place, the fact that convention in this place dictates that he doesn't get to make a contribution in this place is something welcomed by him. University of New England, 24.7%. University of Newcastle, in my own region, 24.3%. Charles Sturt University, 24.1%. The Ballarat University, 23.9%. And the list goes on and on in regional Australia. So it is to state the obvious that those cities-based elite universities are in a much better position to recover money lost by the billions of dollars being ripped out of them by this government as a result of this proposition. Third point, those tempted to think making students pay more should think about the greater good. Our regional universities are key drivers of local economies. They are major employers, but they are more than that. Regional universities are part of the social fabric of the regional communities in which they are located. I'm most familiar with the University of Newcastle in more recent years, which of course is critical to the Hunters economy. But you have to travel to places like Bathurst and Armidale, and I'm sure many areas in Victoria and elsewhere in Tasmania, to fully appreciate what a university town looks like and feels like. You can't go to these places without sensing the critical role the local university plays in the vibrancy, the economic well-being, and indeed the social well-being of that town. And if anyone in this place hasn't done that, I recommend they do it, particularly those in this place who live in and represent capital cities. My fourth point is this. Regional universities also play a vital role in driving national innovation, productivity and development. That is just a fact. And they tend to focus their research in areas like agriculture, which are so important to rural and regional communities. And I'll make this prediction, Mr Deputy Speaker, very sadly. If the minister secures passage through this parliament of this bill and all the unfair changes within it, it won't be long before we have a real structural two-tiered university system in Australia. I've made the point that we already have that to an extent when you separate the G8, the 8 sandstone or elite universities from the others, but we will have a real two-tier system. The divide will be between those elite universities and the rest, but there will be another divide, and that divide will be between those universities who both teach and undertake research and those which teach only. Those that teach, have a think about that. This would be a massive change in the nature of our higher education system in this country. And I make this prediction too. Those teach-only universities, as I call them, are not going to be much of a magnet for those PhD students and other academics really looking forward to opportunities to undertake research. My real concern, though, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that this is not an unintended consequence of this bill. I suspect this is the minister's objective. This is ideologically driven, and this is the minister's objective. And of course, we all know that, for example, those who are likely to practice medicine in rural and regional Australia are those who are from rural and regional Australia and, in particular, have had an opportunity to study medicine in rural and regional Australia. These are issues the Adelaide-based minister simply doesn't understand. Simply doesn't understand. And that's why I am amazed at the consistency of those who sit opposite, amazed at the way in which they have been prepared to come in here, to toe the party line and to insist that these are good changes for rural and regional Australia, because they are not. And I thought some of those sitting on the other side were more courageous than that. And I would have thought they would have been more willing to even subtly, if only subtly, make a more honest contribution, a more objective contribution, and bell the cat on the impact these changes will have not only on students and their capacity to secure an undergraduate degree, and hopefully go beyond that in some cases, but also the impact on their institutions and therefore the impact on their local rural communities. And of course, Mr Deputy Speaker, this bill is like all those others that seek to implement the measures announced in this government's first budget. Like all the others, whether it be health, whether it be fuel taxes, whatever it might be, these measures fall disproportionately on rural and regional Australia. And the silence on the other side is deafening. And there must be people right around rural and regional Australia today, some of them even listening to this debate, simply shaking their heads and wondering and asking themselves what their representatives in this place are thinking to allow such massive changes. And going back just a little bit, I meant to make this point. This idea of these scholarships is just ridiculous. The member for Grey reminded us that the scholarships will come from the increased fees. The government's mandating that of all the increased fees, you need to hide some of that money off for scholarships. Well, this is not the government paying for scholarships or funding scholarships, Mr Deputy Speaker. This is the greatest ruse I've seen in my place. They're running around the country saying, "Oh, don't worry, there'll be higher fees, but there'll be more scholarships." But the scholarships are being paid by the students. And I'll make another prediction. The city universities, the elite universities, who themselves will choose who the scholarships go to, will be cherry-picking around rural and regional Australia, taking our best students out of rural and regional communities, or indeed out of Western Sydney, for example, dragging them into the elite universities, paid for, subsidised by increased fees paid by rural and regional students. That's what will happen. So let's dispense with this crazy idea that there's a new scholarship scheme coming into place to help students. That is just rubbish. And the Prime Minister and his minister should apologise for misleading the Australian community in that way. So that's another example of how this bill will fall disproportionately adversely on people living in rural and regional Australia. So I'm glad the member for Riverina pointed out he hadn't made his contribution yet. I apologise for that. I thought he had. And I say to him again, I look forward to it very much, and I look forward to a very objective contribution from him.
I thank the